Welcome back to art. Today we're going to learn about a famous artist named Josef Albers. We spent a lot of time talking about the element of value. Now we're going to switch into the element of color. And Josef Albers was a very important artist in working with color. When we learn about his work, we'll understand how colors interact with one another. And what I mean by that is different colors have different relationships with other colors. For example, if we look at a blue next to a green, it's going to have a different interaction and a different relationship than a blue is going to have next to a yellow or a green next to a yellow. So when two different colors are next to each other, they kind of work and play off of one another. So we're going to learn about a story. We're going to read a story, and that will explain about Josef Albers. And then we're going to experiment. We're going to do like a science art experiment where we're going to work with some squares and see how those shapes interact with one another, or the colors rather interact with one another. So for today's art lesson, you will need white paper. You could use colored pencils or crayons or markers. And if you would prefer not to use any coloring materials, if you have colored paper, such as construction paper, you could use colored construction paper and scissors and a glue stick. So I hope you enjoy learning about Josef Albers and exploring this science art activity about color. Have fun.
An eye for color. Josef Albers saw art in the simplest things. Growing up in a coal mining city in Germany, he watched his father paint doors as if they were artists' canvases. As a poor student, he mined scraps from the dump and turned them into collages that shined like jewels. When he became an art teacher, he experimented with glass and optical illusions. In 1933, Joseph was invited to teach in America. His goal was to open eyes. Watch what's going on, he told his students, and capture the accident. Although he found simple beauty in America, it was Mexico that captured his eye. The buildings, the pottery, the way the colors looked different under the Mexican sun fascinated him. He wrote to a fellow artist, "Mexico is truly the promised land of abstract art." During one visit, he made a series of abstract paintings inspired by adobe buildings. Their flat roofs and smooth, sun-dried mud surfaces were both simple and bold. Over and over again, Joseph painted nothing but rectangles, long rectangles, tall rectangles, rectangles within rectangles, all in different combinations of colors. Interesting effects emerged. When he changed the colors of the rectangles, the mood of the painting changed. Some paintings felt happy, others quiet. Colors themselves changed. Blue looked different next to orange. Then it did next to beige. Color was not what it first appeared to be, but why? What else could it do? Determined to learn more, he set out to study color as carefully as a scientist. He started in the simplest way possible. In 1949, at the age of 61, Joseph began his exploration. First, he chose one shape, the most geometrically perfect shape, the square. Next, he picked the purest form of color, paint straight from the tube, no mixing. Last, there would be no overlapping of colors, just colors side by side. He painted squares within squares of different sizes and colors. Colors came to life like actors on a stage. One color stepped this way, another popped forward. Colors became softer and louder. The yellow is the same in both squares, only the background has changed. One color became two. The green is the same in both squares, only the background has changed. Or changed into its opposite. Stare at this square for 30 seconds. Now look here. You'll see something in this square if you do that. Colors even disappeared. Joseph kept making painting after painting of squares. With each painting, he proved that colors don't stand alone. They interact. I can kill the most brilliant red by putting it with violet, he said. I can make the dullest gray in the world dance by setting it against black. Joseph put his findings into a book, Interaction of Color. It changed the way the art world looked at color and the way teachers taught art. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York recognized the importance of Joseph's study. It was the first time the museum ever gave a living artist a one-man show of his life's work. For 27 years, Joseph created images of squares, more than 1,000 of them. For him, there was no end to what he could learn about color. I'm not paying homage to a square, said Joseph. It's only the dish I serve my craziness about color in. Today, his squares hang in art galleries around the world, showing that color alone, as simple as it is, can be an exciting form of art.
Interaction of Color by Josef Albers was first published in 1963. It is a book that is about studying and teaching color in an experiential way. Josef Albers fled Nazi Germany. He was teaching at the Bauhaus School there, which centered on merging art and craft together. And he started to work also at the Black Mountain College and Experimental School in North Carolina during the mid-last century. And he's famous as a colorist and an artist and an educator, mostly dealing with how color is almost never seen as it really is and how it continues to deceive us. So we'll take a look at some of his lessons or studies in this video. And this is the app version of his famous book. It showcases a lot of different examples. Originally, these exercises were done in using colored paper instead of paint to mix colors. So we'll go through some of these exercises here, get us to look at how color is deceiving us. One color looks like two. In our demonstrations that a color has many faces, the first problem is to make one and the same color appear as two, as different colors. The more unbelievably different, the more valuable and instructive. No one is able to see the two centered and framed olive grays as the same color, which is what they really are, physically are. So these two bars in the middle, these olive grays, are the same color, but depending on what's surrounding them, we perceive them differently. Same thing with these smaller little swatches. I'm revealing the middle on the app so you can see it's actually the same color that's going all the way through. Different backgrounds make us perceive those little squares differently. These are just going through a few different examples of this, how a color has many faces. So in reality, it's the same green, but we perceive them, they look different. Same with these browns. Looks lighter on the blue, looks darker on the yellow. And I'm moving them so you can see they're the same color, and then moving out of the background to get a sort of clearer idea of what that color might look like. Ta-da!
Just like Albers, we're going to act like artistic scientists. So what happens when I draw a line down the middle of the color wheel, like this? What do you call the colors to the left of my line? Do you have any idea? These colors are cool colors. The blues, the greens, the purples. These colors look like colors of the ocean. They have a temperature to them, so they feel cool. So what do we call colors to the right of my line? They are warm colors. The yellows, the oranges, the reds, the pinks, these colors look like colors of a sunset. They feel warm to our eyes. So does anyone know what we call colors that are across from each other on the color wheel or opposite each other on the color wheel? These colors are known as complementary colors. When things complement each other, it means they go together, like when you give your friend a compliment. Complementary colors include green and red, yellow and purple, and blue and orange. We see a lot of logos and designs that use these colors because they look so good together. I put a couple of examples together for you, but start looking for others the next time you're out and about, or looking through a magazine, or just watching TV. You'll find lots of examples of complementary color schemes. Let's go back to Josef Albers' work. Albers was interested in experimenting with warm and cool colors and complementary colors. Every square is like a miniature science experiment. What do you think of his work now? Have any of your opinions changed? So, artistic scientists, you are going to be making your own square experiments. While you're making these, think about which colors you're choosing. Are you using complementary colors, warm and cool colors, or something else? As you're working on them, see what happens when you put these different colors next to each other. Now I'll show you a quick tutorial about how I made squares just like Josef Albers. Today we're making Josef Albers squares. For this project, you will need construction paper, scissors, and glue. Take the corner and line up the edge of the paper to make a square like this. Then cut off the excess. Make a smaller square by folding and cutting your second color paper in half first. Then folding it into a square and cutting it. Make even smaller squares by using scraps or skinny strips. Make at least 3 different sizes. Then stack them together, biggest on the bottom, smallest on the top, and glue them together. Ta-da! You made squares just like Josef Albers. But what if you don't have construction paper? You can make squares out of any art supplies you have. Here I made a square with drawing paper. Then folded it into fourths. Then I used markers, colored pencils, and even watercolor to fill them in. You can use whatever you have, like a whiteboard or even a drawing app to make your squares. Happy art making!
Okay, next I'd like to show you a variation for how I created an artwork in the style of Josef Albers. I took a envelope and I folded it in half and made a square. So I lined up the corner as you saw, and then trimmed off the excess. I also found some squares around the house. I found a box of tape, and I'm basically just using those squares as stencils. So you can draw squares freehand, you could use a ruler to draw your squares, or you could create some square stencils or find some square objects. So I liked to do the stencils because I'm creating 2 images for my science art experiment. And I want the square shapes to be the same in both of the images. So now you can see my images side by side and the squares are exactly the same size. Next, I chose 3 different crayons. 2 of them are in the orange family and 1 is blue. And the 2 of those colors, those are complementary colors because they're across from each other on the color wheel. So I'm coloring 2 of the squares blue. You'll notice in my science experiment here, one of the squares I colored blue is in the center and the other one is in the middle. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create 2 different situations where the colored squares are next to each other differently. I'm trying to compare the interaction of the colors when two different colors are next to each other. And I want to look at what happens. What's the difference? So I started with a regular piece of printing paper, and I turned those papers into squares just now, as you can see. So in one image, I have a light orange in the center and a blue square around it. And in this instance, I have a blue square in the center and a dark orange around it, and then the light orange on the end. So now you can compare my two square images side by side. And I want you to look closely here. When you look at the image on the left, when you see the light orange next to the blue, and then compare it to the one on the right with the dark orange next to the blue. If you're looking carefully, you'll notice that the blue on the right looks darker. So what we've created here is an optical illusion where the eye is tricked to thinking that the blue square on the right is darker than the blue square on the left. And that occurs because of the relationships between the colors. The light orange square on the left looks like it's popping forward, whereas the light orange square on the right looks like it's pushing backward. And again, that is an optical illusion created by color relationships and how they interact with one another. Go and explore and create something interesting.